Good evening. Sorry. Hold on. I'm going to bring to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for October 22nd, 2024. And let's start with a roll call of attendance, please.
Commissioner Ottinger,
Here.
Commissioner Burns,
Here.
Vice Chair Hanley,
Here.
and Chair Fritz.
Here.
So we have 4 members in attendance with Commissioner Fernandez absent.
Thank you. Next, we'll take comments from members of the public on items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if you have something you'd like to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission that has something to do with our scope in the planning world of Sebastopol, now's your opportunity. If anyone in the room would like to speak and come up to the podium, you have 2 minutes. Not seeing anyone in the room jumping up, we'll go to online. I don't see anyone with a hand raised online. Oh, I do see someone now. Go ahead, Linda. You can unmute yourself and make your public comment. Can she unmute herself?
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we hear you, Linda. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. The pushing buttons there. The big news, as far as I'm concerned, is the presentation that Dante Del Prete gave on the infrastructure a week ago. City Council meeting. All ought to access the verbal thing, the whole thing. It is just a real eye opener, and it might hopefully make some of you rethink what you're doing. But anyway, it turns out that a lot of our infrastructure, meaning the water pipes and the sewer pipes, were built in the 1930s with a life expectancy of 60 to 65 years, which is long since passed. Turns out that they are crumbling and leaking, and mostly they have not been replaced. It was a great presentation. He talked about the wells, the arsenic in them, which wells had which problems and what their depths were, and how long ago they were drilled, and the need for another well, at a cost of about $4 million, and that we need to change out the pipes. At the same time, and I quote, rip up the roads, which are also, as you know, in very poor condition, like at 40 out of 100, which is poor. And despite all of this knowledge and stuff, this information, I might say, and the City Council has
30 seconds.
Forward and done all this new construction, approved it, and we do not have the infrastructure that can accommodate it. We have very inadequate infrastructure. You need to slam the brakes on all this building until we get an infrastructure that can accommodate the current situation, let alone all the new buildings. So that is huge. I trust you also saw the article in the paper about the arsenic. Press Democrat. So anyway,
2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Hope that you will take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Anyone else in the room like to make a comment on something that's not on our agenda this evening? Anyone else on Zoom want to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda for this evening? Okay, seeing no one, I will bring it back, close public comment. Does anyone have a conflict of interest on something on tonight's agenda?
Nope.
All right. Next, we have approval of minutes from October 8th, 2024. Does anyone have any corrections or amendments to make to the minutes, or a motion to make about the minutes?
I don't have any updates. Does anybody else have any updates?
No updates, but I move that we approve it. I just have to find out what it is we're approving.
It's the minutes from October 8th.
October 8th. I
Yep.
move we approve the minutes from October 8th.
And I'll second.
All right. Can we have a vote on the minutes, please?
Commissioner Odger,
Yes.
Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Vice Chair Henley,
Yes.
and Chair Fritz.
Yes.
So that motion passes 4-0.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is an update on the active transportation plan, item 7A. We'll start with a staff report.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief because we do have a presentation from the consultant here. So the Sebastopol Active Transportation Plan is an update to the Sebastopol Bicycle and Pedestrian Master Plan, which was adopted in 2011. The ATP is being developed as part of the countywide active transportation plan through a grant awarded to Sonoma County Transportation Authority, SCTA, and a contract held by SCTA. City staff has been working closely with SCTA and the consultant team, Fair and Peers, and Leshner Planning to gather data and establish existing conditions, engage the community, conduct technical analysis, and develop a draft active transportation plan. City staff and the consultant team previously presented an overview of the project as well as draft projects and policies to the Planning Commission on September 12th, 2023, and May 14th of 2024, respectively. With that, I'm going to end my staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I do want to give time to the consultant team to go through their presentation and then open it up for public comment.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions of staff before we get into the presentation? Okay, then who's ever making the presentation, come on up.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to see if I can pull up the presentation on my laptop so I can see it at the same time. All right. Well, thank you, John, for the introduction. Good evening, commissioners, members of the public. My name is Eleanor Leshner with Leshner Planning. I'm representing the consultant team, which is led by Fair and Peers. We've been supporting SCTA with the countywide active transportation plan update. Tonight's the third milestone update, and I'm excited to share some updates, a little bit of new information after a brief project overview to give everyone a refresher, and in case there are any new folks in the audience. I'll summarize a bit about our public engagement strategies before going into some examples of the proposed projects in the plans, our prioritization approach, some draft policies, and then we'll get into some considerations around implementation. Next slide. So just at a really high level, the purpose of this plan update, which again is a countywide update, first is around creating a plan that's up to date with current best practices and really create a network that's for all ages and abilities, and I'll define that in just a few slides. The second piece is around identifying both local connections as well as regional connections, since it is part of the larger countywide plan. And then the third piece is developing a prioritization framework, identifying funding to really focus and streamline implementation and get these projects built, which is, what we all want. Next slide. So other times I came to give a presentation to this group, I talked a little bit more about some of the earlier tasks in the scope of work. So tonight we're at the draft plan stage. The draft plan was released earlier this month, and we're collecting comments through the end of November. So the plan is to take comments, from this group. We'll be going to City Council next month, comments from members of the public, and then finalize the plan in early next year. And just to reiterate that this is a countywide effort with 7 local plans. So Sebastopol is one of 7 local jurisdictions that are going through this plan update process together. I'll briefly share the vision statement. We talked about this last time, but just wanted to show this on the screen for everyone. So really a focus on safety, connectivity, equity, quality of life. And again, this focus on all ages and abilities. Next slide. The plan has 3 main goals around, I'm going to go through kind of quickly because there's a bit of material to get through, but I do want to set the framework. So the goals are around creating a connected and reliable network, a network that's safe and well-maintained, pointing to the importance of maintenance, and then lastly, to be community-oriented and place-based. The next slide shows a little bit more information about what we mean when we talk about all ages and abilities, and really the shift from kind of older active transportation planning that may be focused on people who are already comfortable with the network that we have there today, biking in bike lanes that are a bit more strong and fearless. And there's been a shift to really focus on the 60% of people nationwide that fall under the interested but concerned category. This means people, they're interested in walking and biking more for transportation, but they may be concerned about safety or comfort. So that's really core to this plan update and incorporates new analysis techniques like level of traffic stress. Next slide. We're also looking to incorporate other industry best practices. For example, class 4 separated bikeways were not codified during the previous pedestrian bicycle master plan. We're also considering micromobility, emerging technology, and quick build projects where that might be appropriate. Next slide. I think everyone here is maybe familiar with the existing facilities, so I'll just touch on this briefly. There are a lot of assets, I would say, in town. When we went out to the community, people talk a lot about enjoying the Joe Rodota West County Trail, being excited about the green bike lanes on Petaluma Avenue and Main Street. And then a lot of the other facilities are what we call class 3 bike routes on neighborhood streets, which are shown in red. Next slide. So this map shows our level of traffic stress analysis. And what I want to highlight here is that the higher stress streets, which are shown in red and brown, are unsurprisingly on most of the arterials like Bodega Avenue, Petaluma Avenue, Healdsburg Avenue, et cetera. And a lot of streets in town, based on this analysis, come up as being low stress. So on neighborhood streets where speeds are 25 miles per hour, for example, there are lower traffic volumes. There are a lot of opportunities for what we call these lower stress streets where people of all ages may be more comfortable. And also just note here, one note that's important, the yellow kind of highlighting on the map refers to segments of the roadway network that were identified by SCTA in their countywide Vision Zero safety plan. And so that looks at where collisions are concentrated countywide, and those are segments of the roadway where more traffic crashes are happening. So that's also important. The next slide talks about just kind of our overall outreach approach on the project. Again, this was a countywide project with lots of outreach happening all around the county, all the different jurisdictions. This is the third time we're coming to Planning Commission. We've had a project website with a web map and survey last fall, and then an update in the spring. We've also done a number of what we call pop-up events all around the county. In Sebastopol, we were at the Farmers Market last fall. We were at the Apple Blossom Festival in April. And then we hosted a Sebastopol-focused open house public workshop in May at the Art Center. So those are some photos from the workshop where we had a chance to meet a lot of different members of the community. The project team, city staff, SCTA staff was there to talk with people and gather input. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about bike facility selection process. So in order to get to our recommendations, there are several considerations we had for selecting these facilities. Public community input, which I just touched on. Also thinking about speed of vehicles and number of vehicles or vehicle volumes. And then, of course, the space available on the street or the available right-of-way is important when considering feasibility or what may be appropriate. And just highlighting here that general industry guidance these days is to provide more separation as vehicle volumes or speeds increase. The next slide provides a couple of images kind of describing the different facilities that you may see out there today or you may see in our recommendations. The top line are shared facilities. So today there are several bike routes, again, and mostly on neighborhood streets. And we're proposing in the plan to upgrade several of these, or basically all of them, to what we call bike boulevards nowadays. And the concept here is to create a network of streets that prioritize people walking and biking. These are streets where speeds are slower. It's like 25 miles per hour or less, and they're lower traffic volumes. So we wouldn't recommend this somewhere on an arterial where there's high traffic volumes. It's really placed to kind of indicate this is a more comfortable street for people from age 8 to 80 to be walking or biking. And we've left it intentionally a little bit open-ended in the plan how to define these. I think in some cases, if speeds are already low and volumes are already low, there may not need to be so many physical improvements. But if there are areas where people are speeding or people are concerned about that, traffic calming like traffic circles or speed humps could be an option on those routes. I touched on that because I know there's been some questions about bike boulevards. I'll quickly go through the rest, which bike lanes I think folks are familiar with. A buffered bike lane is when there's a painted buffer, but not a physical buffer between the vehicle lane and the bike lane. And then separated bike lane is when there's a physical separation. So that could be like the soft tip posts, like are in this photo. It could be a parking lane, which is also in the photo. They kind of have 2 levels of separation there. People sometimes use planters, lots of different options there. And then the last one is multi-use path, like the Joe Rodota Trail. Now I'm going to move into talking a bit more about the recommendations. I know there's a lot of lines and numbers on this map, so I'm not going to go through every one, but I will call out a few examples and just highlight when I was just talking about bike boulevards. Those are indicated in the kind of red-orange color. And a big focus of the plan, based on what we heard from the public, is, we have these great trails already in town and improving access to those trails, as well as to key locations like downtown and schools. So on the next slide, I selected with the city just 5 examples to just kind of describe a little bit of the range of projects that you'll see in the draft plan. Number 5, Regal Road, is a project the city has been working on for many years now. The county is taking the lead with the next steps on this project, but it is a priority for the city to coordinate with the county and make sure that gets implemented. The second one I'm going to highlight is the Willow Street to Joe Rodota Trail connection, basically improving the connection between Willow Street and the post office and the Joe Rodota Trail. That could be wayfinding, delineating the route through the existing parking lot and then improving crossings at both Main Street and Petaluma Avenue. Another one, just to give a little bit of variety, is this proposed seasonal undercrossing of SR 12. So just to the east of town, that would connect people basically from the south side of SR 12 to the Meadow Lark Field section of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Trail. Number 18, kind of in that similar area, maybe people came up Moore Street to get here tonight, is an idea to pilot doing parking protected separated bikeways on Moore Street to improve the connection between the Joe Rodota Trail and the West County Trail. And I think this is listed maybe in a separate project, but also to improve the bicycle detection at the Morris Street and Sebastopol Road intersection. And then the last one I'll highlight here is just to improve the connection between the West County Trail and Annalee High School and look at reconfiguring the entrance essentially to the high school to make it better for people to walk and bike and perhaps encourage more of that activity to the school. So the next slide merely shows the previous map overlaid on the existing conditions map. So you can have a sense of what the full network would look like at build out. And then the next slide shows figure 6, which shows conceptual alignments of potential future trails that have been identified by community members with a strong preference for having these be off-street trail connections. The dashed lines are approximate locations, and the final alignment would depend on a number of factors. So including these trails in the plan sets them up to be eligible for funding to pursue some kind of feasibility study because this would require more study, additional community engagement to advance. And so we recommend including in this way to pursue that type of funding. And the plan also outlines examples of factors that would need to be considered, like opportunities for land dedication and easements, utilities, maintenance, insurance, and many other factors. So it sets that project up to move forward. Just touch briefly on the prioritization criteria because I know we went through this last time, but I mentioned before another advancement in this plan is that we do have a prioritization framework that's consistent at the countywide and then local level. And these criteria were selected to be aligned with many common grant funding criteria, such as safety, equity, proximity to transit, schools, et cetera. So By ranking projects based on these criteria, we seek to identify projects that may be well suited to go after this more competitive funding. And basically for each of these first 6 criteria, each project was either given, a point of 1 or 0, whether it falls under these categories. So I'll just give a few examples. For safety, I mentioned earlier, the SCTA has a countywide Vision Zero high injury network that shows the concentration of collisions countywide. So if a project is on or along one of those corridors, it would get a point. That's an example. I'll just give another one, being close to schools. If it's a pedestrian project, if the project is half mile from any school, it would get a point, or a mile from a school for biking because people can travel more on a bike. So the last piece was in the round 2 engagement that we did in the spring. If we had a lot of community input about any one project, we're open to adjusting the tiers based on community input. And so all of these criteria were weighted equally and helped sort the projects into 3 tiers. If we go to the next slide, so we're not ranking the projects, 1 through 100. They're in these 3 general buckets, with the idea that tier 1 projects are most aligned with local and regional goals to be prioritized for implementation and funding first. Just have a few more slides. So the next one talks about overall kind of a summary of the policies included in the plan. I won't go through all of these bullets, but they touch a variety of topics, from coordination with other agencies, applying industry best practices, looking at local funding opportunities, facilitating implementation, and supporting countywide education and encouragement programs and activities. On the next slide, I just gave a couple of slides with a couple examples. These are not all the policies, but just to give you a sense of the breadth and depth of the policies. So we have policies around sidewalk gaps, bike parking, funding, wayfinding. The next slide, about maintaining existing bicycle facilities, about ensuring bike detection functions properly at all signalized intersections. We have several policies and actions related to crossing safety for both people walking and biking, making sure crossing improvements are consistent with industry standards. Mentioned, the connection between our project and some of the Vision Zero goals, and then the desire to, consider new mobility options, e-bikes, e-scooters, et cetera. There are a few policies around that. The last policy slide just touched on a couple other points around transit shelters and kind of local encouragement and education opportunities. The next piece is around implementation. So in the local plan, there is a list of the various regional, state, and federal funding sources. In the countywide plan, there's also additional information about each of these sources. So for people that are interested in digging a bit deeper, I would encourage you to also read the countywide plan, which has kind of additional information on some of these things. What can I say here? I think we can get into this a bit in the Q&A, but some of these regionally are funds that SCTA manages, and then of course there are a number of competitive grant programs at the state and federal level. Maybe just one thing I'll say about this. There are new grant funds available. I think a lot of communities are excited about the Safe Streets and Roads for All program, which came out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, and they've set aside in the billions of dollars for safety-related projects. So they've been doing a lot of calls for funding over the past year or two. I think this is almost my final slide on implementation. Another piece that we want to integrate into this plan to take this plan to the next level essentially is, we want to be measuring our progress, having monitoring metrics. And so we have proposed several monitoring metrics across the 3 main goals of the plan around measuring bikeway facilities and sidewalks gaps that are filled in, tracking collisions and crossing improvements, as well as bike parking facilities. So those were a couple things we thought would be important to Sebastopol and also open to discussion with the commission about that. So finally, just getting to next steps. As I mentioned, the draft plan is available for public comment through the end of next month. It's available at this website, and I have a short link that I can share with folks that might be a little easier to type into your phone. We will be at Planning Commission on November 19th, and then staff will be presenting the plan, the final plan, in early 2025. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions about the presentation? Go ahead.
In terms of like the longer term schedule, maybe it's the medium term schedule. I mean, from here to implementation, it seems like there are a lot of hurdles. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the steps that would happen between, say, successful acceptance of the plan by the council and then actual implementation when we see change on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also invite John, sorry, John, to weigh in on that. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, once the plan is adopted, it kind of becomes the city's responsibility to implement the projects, and SCTA and Fair and Peers have provided us with a list of funding opportunities. So it becomes an effort on the city's end to make sure that, for one, we're applying for those grants, and if we do get awarded those grants, to push the implementation component of that. So it's really once it's adopted, it becomes the city's responsibility to go for full implementation. SCTA is providing kind of the overall legwork as the document itself goes, for the various cities and other jurisdictions, and then it's on them to implement those projects.
Okay,
to go forward.
Thank you for that. Do you have a sense of how long it takes to apply for a grant and find out you've been successful? I mean, I realize there's multiple different sources here, and so it probably varies, but is that like a 12-month process, a 24-month process? I'm just curious.
I don't know. It really depends on the time frame on how long the grant is open for. So if it's a grant that's open for 3 months, then you've got that 3-month period of applying for it, and then it's probably safe to say it's another 2 to 3 months for the review, depending on the agency, and then a final award of that grant, and then it comes forward to the city moving forward with it, because usually it has to have some sort of council adoption to move.
Okay.
So it could be a minimum 4 or 5 months. It could be years before it gets to that process.
And then
So
presumably,
it's very long range.
thank you. Presumably, once that happens, let's say we're successful in getting a grant, there's a design phase, and then there's a bid phase, and it has to be implemented, or does the
Correct.
city implement through Public Works?
In most cases, it would
Depends.
go through a bid and design phase.
Okay.
I don't think the city has the capacity to implement some of these. Some of the smaller individual ones that might be simple enough for the city to handle, we could probably do.
Okay.
But for the larger scale ones, I would say that it's probably going to go through a bid and then proposal process.
Okay. Thank you. I did have one other question about HIN. The measurements, are they all traffic accidents, including bicyclists, pedestrians, or just?
I believe it's all modes, although for the map that I showed, I think they have it broken out as well on their website.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions at this time before we open up for public comment? Okay, great.
Okay,
Eleanor, I'm
thank
sure we'll
you.
probably ask questions in a bit, but
Thank you.
thanks. Now I'll open this up for public comment. So if you would like to make a public comment about the active transportation plan, now's your opportunity. And we'll start with someone in the room, then we'll go to Zoom and just kind of go back and forth in that manner. And we'll acknowledge we have got quite a few emails about this item. So anyone like to start off in the room to make a public comment on this? Come up to the podium, please. If you could state your name, please, and yeah, you'll have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, Gavin Waters. I I'd like to say that I fully support the bike Sebastopol letter to the commission. I assume the commission received that letter, and the action items or points raised in the letter. I'd also like to say from a personal perspective that I'm encouraged to see the trail proposed, the Apple Blossom and Gravenstein Trail, included in the presentation. I'd love to see those prioritized on the tier list as well. And through presentation that I observed at the SCTA CB PAC this afternoon, I'll tell you that in Sonoma County, there's something like 3 miles of separated class 4 bikeways throughout the entire county. And I'd really like to see some of the bike boulevards denoted in the plan upgraded to class 4 bikeways. It's just unacceptable that a county as progressive and wealthy as Sonoma County, and that includes Sebastopol, has so few of those class 4 facilities. So I encourage you, as you're looking
30
at the
seconds.
plan and providing feedback, that you also consider, which of those projects can be upgraded to class 1 or class 4 bikeways instead of just bike boulevards. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Zoom next. Would anyone on Zoom like to make a public comment? Please raise your virtual hand or turn your camera on and wave your actual hand. Okay, Linda, I see your hand. You can unmute yourself and make your public comment.
So anyway, I'm 75 and a half, and I'm on my bike just about every day about this time. I ride on the West County Trail, and I also walk. I ride my bike down to High School Road, and I turn around and walk back and walk. I walk on Hurlbut on my way back. Anyway, I am a bicyclist, and I also in my youth, in my younger days, I rode a bike about a third of the way across Canada on Trans-Canadian Route 1. But anyway, I will not be getting on any of the bike lanes in the roads here ever. Just recently, one of my neighbors was hit and went to the hospital while he was actually walking with 2 young children who were on their bikes in the bike lane. We've also had 2 people, I believe, killed over there by a high school road by a drunk driver. This is wine country. We have AA meetings, I understand, around the clock. So you've got to just assume, I'm one of the older. I don't drive any more cars, but got to assume that we've got a lot of impaired drivers for one reason or another, either alcohol or age.
30
anyway,
seconds.
Basically, I think that it's unsafe the way a lot of these bike lanes are without any kind of separation, and I will not be riding in them.
Thank you for your comment. Next, we'll go back to the room. Come on up, Lynn.
Yeah, Lynn Diedler. And we have a group of people that put together 3 really great multi-purpose trails to go in and around Sebastopol. But these projects were not included in the ATP. They were tucked back somewhere with a map that had just a very vague line or two that you couldn't decipher of anything. And these were probably the most significant thing that could be in there. But why weren't they displayed? You know, I think the combination of, I don't know, it was never made clear why the staff or the consultant didn't put them in there. Anyway, and they showed no interest in them. They declined invitations to tour these trails. They did not display them at public meetings, at least 4 public meetings. How can people comment on these if they don't even see them? And, you know, a few people knew about them. I see them here. But I have letters that were signed by the critical property owners that are required to make these
30
things.
seconds.
And the Trailhead Park was left out. Anyway, in the ATC, you know, there was a lot of other information that was not appropriate put along with the trail, but the ATP is described as a goal, a vision, and not a study. So anyway, these are well worked out trails, and I hope you will time.
Thank you, Lynn. I'll go back to Zoom. And Phil, can you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah. So not only do I strongly support the Apple Blossom and Gravenstein and other trails and many of the letters that were written in, I also kind of want to throw in there that I'd like to see the plan show how some of these projects can fit together and augment each other, you know, to make like more of a bike roadmap and a complete plan. You know, how can one trail benefit the other trails, or what collection of projects makes a, you know, so that the sum is greater than the parts. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Phil. Back to the room. Anyone else?
Hello. I'd like to say that I really strongly support the improvements that are laid out in this plan, but I would like to see a little more ambition. I think that a lot of the current bike facilities are like fundamentally unsafe just because of the streets that they're on. For example, bike lanes on 116 suffer from being on a road that is fundamentally like a very high traffic volume road. And I would really like to see some serious protection put in for bicyclists on that route. That's just an example, but I really think that the plan just doesn't go far enough. I'm really happy to see that this plan is like making huge improvements on what we have, but I'd just like to see it go further. That is all.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? And we'll go back to another person in the room.
Hi there, Steve Pierce. I want to support the Bike Sebastopol letter that was sent to the commission. And I think one of the weakest links is the finance section. We basically just have a laundry list of bullet points, and that's just not adequate. It doesn't even mention the fact that there's a 15% required match by cities for probably what's going to be the main funding source, Go Sonoma. Critical piece of information. So here we are as a city, really pressed for finances. It's questionable whether our planning department can really put in the amount of time and effort to write grants. We used to have a grant writer for 1 year. The city is not really all that interested in pursuing that again. So I'm hopeful we can get grants, but it's a real steep hill to climb. And we need a bit of a reality check. We need a low-hanging fruit list. What can we do with just a little bit of money? As much as we can do with just a little bit of money, given that 15% match. So I also have some questions. What's the $1.2 million for the corridor study? We have a current downtown study. I think it's $200,000. Can the scoring and will the scoring be made public? Because as the consultants leave, we need to pick it up and see where we go from here. And a lot of that means kind of
30
digging
seconds.
in, making priorities of all these tier 1 items. There's quite a few of them. What do we go after first? And when it comes to the cost estimates, we have some hard cost estimates, no soft cost estimates. So what percent of hard costs are soft costs? And then whenever we do these things as a city, we say, well, what's a contingency amount? Lately, we've been using 50%. That really drives up our costs. So much more detail on the finance end of it.
Thank you. Still seeing no one on Zoom. Anyone in the room?
Hi, I'm Emily Sharton. I'm the advocacy coordinator for the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. And we definitely appreciate that the first policy goal of the draft is a connected and reliable network that's accessible to all ages and abilities. We really hope that this will be a guiding principle when the city starts building this network out. We can't emphasize enough how important that is, not only the plan, but the timely build out. People quite simply need to be able to get where they want to go, whether it's school, work, or shopping. The draft map makes a lot of connections, but it is still a concern that main roads like Healdsburg Ave, Main Street, and Petaluma Ave are a question mark. We appreciate that they're listed in the project list as studies, and glad that they are listed as tier 1 projects. But as the main arterials in town, they really need to be a top priority. These roads should have protected lanes for cyclists along with traffic calming. The Bike Coalition is definitely concerned about the number of Class 3 bike boulevards being recommended. Again, you're asking bikes and vehicles to share the same travel lane, which for many riders is just not a low stress situation. If this is the only type of facility available on some of these roads, we really urge the city to carefully consider the traffic calming elements that can make bike boulevards more effective, and to understand that they really do involve a lot more than just applying sharrows to the road.
30 seconds.
Lastly, just there's been some talk about the cost of building new projects. We would encourage the city really to consider quick builds, which are temporary and less expensive, and allow the community to try out certain types of bike lanes or other infrastructure before they become permanent. These kinds of projects also enable the community to start building out the network sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, anyone else in the room?
My name is Roberta Delgado. I have lived in Sonoma County for 41 years. In Forestville, Northwest Santa Rosa, near downtown Santa Rosa, and now here in Sebastopol. And that entire time I have ridden a bicycle. And I do want to say, please get me off of secondary roads shared with cars going too fast on already high speed limit roads with no shoulder. Class 1 trails connecting our communities. And the outskirts of our communities, therefore, with the core. Within our communities, yes, please, Class 4 protected lanes. That when I've had the opportunity to be where parked cars protect me, it's absolutely the best. Drivers don't want to hit a parked car, even though they will encroach in a bike lane where a cyclist already is or is approaching. Also, those parking protected lanes naturally create a road dieting. It means that travel lanes need to be a little bit narrower. Folks, slow down. I also would like for there to be a lot more bike parking, but I live on Healdsburg Avenue, and I can tell you that I ride 2 to 3 times a
seconds.
week on it. I wear a very loud whistle, and I use it almost every time to tell a driver that somehow doesn't see me in my bright colors and my flashing fore and aft. So, please.
Thank you. Still seeing no one on Zoom. We'll stick with the room. Anyone else like to make a comment?
Hi, my name's Lynn Zackerson, and I really appreciate the detail of this plan. And like so many other people, we have, that have talked tonight, we see that there's a lot of ambition with the plan, but what's the real plan for implementation? I think we're all anxious to see some of that. I am a cyclist, but I'm here today to talk about just a pedestrian issue on Leland and Robinson. I live on Leland, and pretty much every day I see people coming over those. It's a small street. It's like 400 yards long, the whole street. There's a big hill on either end, and there's blind corners, and the cars just come whipping down there. They don't know what's around that corner. And my neighbor was backing out of her driveway. A car came off of Robinson, and he couldn't slow down enough. He had to pass her on the right and destroyed her landscaping and just kept going. And this is a car, not a person he was avoiding. But there's a lot of pedestrians there. A lot of people walk from Luther Burbank Center to town. There's a lot of people who walk to the different schools in the neighborhood there. It connects First Street, just some really favorite walking corridors come through Leland. And so a 25 mile an hour speed limit there is just too fast. And that would be a simple, not very expensive fix until something more permanent like a one-way, or I don't know. The traffic calming sounds great, but I'd like to see more details on what that is. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room like to make a public comment on this item? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion and further action. I guess we'll start with what exactly would the consultant and staff like to see or hear? I mean, do you want us to comment on specific things or general things or whatever? Is there some kind of focus to what you're looking back for in terms of feedback?
I think mostly just a combination of the two. And if there's anything specifically that you either want to decategorize or upcategorize, then let us know so we can make those modifications. And if there's anything additional past this meeting tonight, the public comment period for this project is open till the end of November. So that does allow for people in the room and then also commissioners to provide additional comment past tonight and also coming back to City Council November 19th.
Thank you. Eleanor, can you maybe before we get started with our discussion, just let people know where they can, if they want to make further comments online, like where do you do that?
Yeah, and I'm noticing, is anyone missing these?
Oh.
The link is available in the slide deck, and I think the short link, it's like if you know the bit.ly short links, it's SC for Sonoma County -ATP. So that's the short link to get to the project website, but it's on the city website.
Is there a link on
Yeah.
the city website?
I think right on the front page of the city website, there should be a link. Yeah.
So if people have until, over another month to make additional comments, please feel free to use that resource as well, because the consultant will take all that information and put it into the final plan. Anyone want to start off with comments or thoughts? Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I like the idea of prioritizing the improvements to the main roadways that most people travel on, especially the commuters. over some of the smaller streets where people can just ride their bike anyway, and we hope they're safe, to actually make it really feel safe to drive through town on the freeways. I also, regarding the Apple Blossom Trail and the Gravenstein Trail, I really think something should move forward there, even though it's long-term, because preserving the corridor is important. Particularly the Apple Blossom, I think, is an excellent site for just a pedestrian walkway, since the highway there is not always very good for pedestrians. It should be prioritized, at least for that. And the one going south, I think it goes a Gravenstein also really will connect cyclists to other areas, especially if we can get it off the highway, because there's room. And that very general line, as far as I'm concerned, could be in the Laguna for the most of the time that it doesn't flood. And I wish that could be prioritized as a project that would really help solve some of those other problems of people commuting right on 116.
I want to know, before we get further, can you maybe address the kind of link between this and the Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Grant? Because I know some of the kind of main corridors will be kind of discussed in more detail as part of that.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and meant to touch on that a little bit in the presentation, but as you all saw in the draft plan, some of the main streets in town are identified as corridor studies. So part of that is the city is launching a study of Main Street and the circulation downtown. And actually, my colleague Jeff here from Fair and Peers is going to give a presentation about that after we wrap up this agenda item. So if anyone's interested in that, you can learn more about that project. So it makes sense at this stage, since that project is just getting started, to leave in this plan to kind of reference that future plan rather than say anything specific. But I think in the document, we do have some information, like it should be a low stress street. I was trying to look in the plan if we had something about protected facilities. I think there's a note that says protected facilities if deemed feasible. So there were a couple of notes that were added into the project descriptions this round, since you saw them in May, around really trying to prioritize these protected facilities that we hear a lot of interest about. And I think we landed on the city being okay with the language if it says if feasible.
I wonder if you can also speak to, there's a question about, kind of money and matching money. And from what I understand, isn't there some money that's controlled by the SCTA that can be used as local match money?
For maybe like state or federal grants?
Yeah.
And I wonder, I don't know, my colleague Jeff may have some thoughts on that, but unfortunately, Dana was not able to call in tonight, but we can follow up on that detail about whether the match can come from SCTA versus from local funds.
Thanks.
Seth, go ahead. I do, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. In reading the letter from Bike Sebastopol and hearing from Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, it seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between the people that I would categorize perhaps as being in that 7% of people who are core riders, who probably have the kind of on the ground expertise because they're kind of road warriors every day. They use it, they feel it, they have feedback. To me, it makes sense for this feedback to be incorporated into the report, or to at least have a influence on the report. So I would recommend that these recommendations are reviewed and incorporated as appropriate to the report. Just because it's real live feedback from people who are doing it every day. And if they're feeling it, then the other 93% of people that we're trying to get on their bikes may be more inclined to follow suit. That's one thing. The other question I was going to ask was really about the trails and why they aren't a part of the report. I wasn't here from the beginning, so I'm doing some catch up here.
So the trails are in the plan. They're presented separately in Figure 6 with the understanding that the final, there is some sensitivity about showing lines on the map over private property. And based on the discussion that we had with the Planning Commission back in May, what we did is we went back and we added in additional detail about criteria that would need to be met or considerations that would need to be considered for future stages. And so those were around, the land dedication and easements. There were maybe nine or 10 different criteria around maintenance agreements, who's maintaining the trails, insurance. So the proposed projects at this point are more focused on public right-of-way on street. And at this point, there was a need for a distinction between public right-of-way, private right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. So it's there, but it's complicated, right? Yeah.
That's another way of saying it, I guess.
I can also provide some background.
Thank you.
Great.
Good, Jane. Yep.
So as I think we've indicated, there are legal considerations to the city's adoption of a plan line across private property, and there are a number of things that would need to happen in order for us to adopt a plan line across private property. And these trails, great location. Everybody wants the Class 1 trails. I don't ride a bike unless I'm on Class 1 trail. So the Apple Blossom and Gravenstein trails are important things. Here's the thing. If it's not in the plan, it doesn't get considered for funding. And that's really the crux of it here. And the next opportunity to include it's going to be 2034. And so you can see why there's some desperation on, why aren't these trails that the community's been talking about included in the plan? So without going into all the legal nuances, I would tell you that city staff supports inclusion of the trails in the plan, but with disclaimers that the actual location is approximate and the final alignment of the trail may be different than what's shown in there. We just have to be careful about drawing a plan line across someone's private property before we've engaged in and reached agreement with those private property owners.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah, that's helpful. So I have a question. Are those, because I don't remember, I did read it, but I don't remember, are those trails listed as in table 2 as a project, or is it just on the map? And should they be listed as a project, or is it on the map sufficient?
Right now they're presented on the map, and right now they're not in the table. And based on discussions with the consultant team, the city and SCTA, that would be sufficient to pursue funding for a feasibility study, which would likely be like the next step to try to address that list of considerations. So we're seeing it as a good compromise and appropriate way to include it at this time.
Thank you. I have one more. Bike share opportunities. I think it's briefly mentioned, but I wondered if any more serious thought could be given to, once people arrive in Sebastopol, if they're visiting from out of town, that they can actually park their car and get on a bike and use that as their primary means of transportation.
If I'm trying to remember if it's referenced in the Sebastopol plan of, you may be aware that the SCTA and SMART just opened their bike share program more along the smart corridor, I think last week or the week before.
Okay.
So I think the main focus is getting that regional program up and running, making sure it's working. And then within Sebastopol, I don't think we've discussed that in great detail, but open to hearing ideas.
Okay. Well, for example, Healdsburg has Bird, which is a private. There are multiple bike share companies around. And it occurs to me that we could be ripe for actually having some stations that have some bikes that people can get on, so they don't have to bring their bike with them. They can just do that when they get it.
I think there was, in previous Climate Action Committee meetings, there was some discussions about that being a possibility. And I want to say that a few members of the Climate Action Committee reached out to one of those companies, and I don't know what the status. If you have further information, go right
there.
ahead. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that the big issue was the size of our community, the hilly terrain, the age of our population, and the need for the person who manages the program locally to make money doing so. And the equation just wasn't correct for all those reasons. and maybe some more that I forgot, but
Okay, thank you.
Also, we had to find that person to manage it, and we didn't. The bike shop wasn't here. There was a few people in San Rosa that it made sense, but there wasn't anyone here that we could make sense who would want to do it, and for the investment and the return.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Do you have some other comments or thoughts, Debbie?
I think I couldn't quite hear what you were saying, but I think you brought up most of my points. I'm pretty sure this might be redundant, sorry. But just listening to the public, I think there was a lot of written comments that we got and a lot of things that I felt like really were important that needed to be addressed. So listening to the bike coalition, people who are using it. And then there was one point someone brought up tonight that I think I heard, I can't remember. It was something about a less expensive way to kind of test the waters, so to speak. And I'm just wondering if that's a reality and something that can be prioritized, because sometimes I see the funding stymie some of these things, and also the, how we think it's going to be and how it actually is can be quite different, and especially with something of this nature. And then Kathy, who I agree with, a lot about the bigger streets and being a concern and wanting to focus on making sure they're safe and walkable, bikeable.
I think something to pick up on that point about the kind of quick build, just one that just kind of has always bugged me and it'd be a really easy quick build item, is the intersection of Huntley and Dutton at kind of the corner of Parkside School property. It has the biggest curb radius, I think, in town. It's probably 30 or 40 feet. It's gigantic. And just some of those flexible delineators, pop those around and tighten that corner up would make a huge difference, I think, in terms of that. I just can't believe someone put a turning radius like that at an elementary school. So I think that like looking for those types of projects, I think would be really helpful to find out, like, yeah, where do we tighten curb radii to make a shorter crossing distance with just really off the shelf, inexpensive items. I think those kinds of things we should try to prioritize. I also agree with trying to, as we think about these projects, really thinking about them in a network kind of way, because if you can ride a bike a block, but then you're just stuck, it doesn't really do you any good. So I think we really need to think about, as we start to implement these, pick off things like in a cluster, like, okay, we're going to do something from here to here and make sure that that whole line works, rather than going 2 blocks and then skipping 4 blocks because of some reason, then picking up, just making sure that that's considered. And I think something that might be helpful, and I think this was in the letter from Bike Sebastopol, is maybe diagrammatically in the plan, trying to focus, instead of always showing the whole city in every plan, like doing some, dividing up into quadrants or something, just so, because it is hard to look at those and get a sense of what the individual pieces are. So just sort of a graphic suggestion is to try to dial that in a little bit tighter in some places. And I agree with someone to come about the bike boulevards, just putting a Sharrow marking and saying bike boulevard. I think we need to think about that a little bit beyond that, because I live on High Street. That's one of the bike boulevard designations. It's a relatively slow street just because of the width, but yeah, just painting something on the street isn't going to really make that much better. I'd rather save for doing some other traffic calming. So there are, sometimes people do speed on that street, but thinking on the wider streets in particular, as you get towards the kind of western, newer part of town around Brookhaven and Valentine and Covert Lanes, those are really much wider streets. Really thinking of how to maybe do a protected bike lane, move the parking in, and even doing a spacing on the term where like both ways of the bike lane are on one side of the street, instead of having like one way, like having, what I mean? Isn't there a name for that?
Two-way. Oh.
Yeah, maybe there's opportunities for that on some of the wider streets. What else? I definitely also am very supportive of the, class one, bike lanes. I think that's really important for a lot of people. And we don't have a lot of opportunities for that in town since we're so built out. But I think these proposed routes that have been explored and talked about for many years, I think that's a really good starting point. And I think those are important to consider. What else? The one thing that I would also like to just do kind of citywide, I think that would also be kind of a start as a low hanging fruit, but it needs sort of additional things to go along with it, is I don't see any reason for any road in town to be above 25 miles an hour. Like, I don't know why we don't have any 45 mile per hour roads in town, I don't believe, but even just 30 or 35, it's a small town. It's not very wide. I think we can handle driving 25 miles an hour from one town to the other. And I think that makes biking a lot more comfortable to people. But also, to follow up on that, it's not just a sign. You can't just put a sign that says 25 miles an hour. You have to actually make people drive 25 miles an hour. And so that comes back to road design, narrowing the lanes, putting up plastic delineators where you can, just to make it feel like you don't want to drive faster than 25. And I would suggest that, especially on the bike boulevards, something that would help is, 20 max on those streets. There should be even 15. I would be comfortable with, you shouldn't. And even, again, I live on High Street, and I don't feel comfortable really driving over 15 miles an hour as it is. Some people do, and they go pretty fast. But, again, that's an example of narrower streets do make people slow down. I witness that every day. What else? Oh, the one thing that also I wanted to highlight from the Bike Sebastopol letter was that would be, I know you sort of talked about the scoring, but I think that would be interesting to include as an appendix, just to go through all of the policies, proposed policies, and just show how they scored in terms of the tier, so just people have a better understanding of that, because I think it is a little opaque the way it is right now, and I think it'd be good for people to see this is how we got to these numbers. And I have a lot of very specific comments, but I'll save that for just the online comment. Anyone else have any final comments? Does that give you?
I do have one.
Oh, go ahead.
And I just think one of the reasons that I asked the question about schedule earlier is that this can be a protracted process. And back to the quick wins, what are the things that we can do so that we can start to feel the progress, and also introduce the idea of bikes sharing the road. Paint may be all we can afford initially. And so what can we do with that? Is it worth trying that on some streets to see if we can start changing the mindset before implementing bigger, more costly, more permanent installations?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I like the quick build idea, and trying to do, figure out what those quick build projects are and how we can do them with paint and city staff, or even volunteers, in some instances.
Can I just respond to that?
Yeah, sure.
And just say, I think, at this stage, what's really helpful is, hearing from you all and the community, like, what are the opportunities for quick build? I think in other towns, maybe those conversations started earlier, so they were in the plan at this stage, but that hasn't been like the core part of the conversation yet. So this would be the time to say, like, this is the perfect opportunity for quick build or whatnot. Like, we already have the Huntley-Dutton intersection in there, and there may be a few other things that are well set up for kind of earlier, like a test demonstration project.
I think one that has been talked about a lot in this room, and it doesn't seem like a super complicated thing, is crosswalks across Moore Street at Laguna Parkway and McKinley. There's no official way to get across Moore Street from Sebastopol Road, like, ever. Like, that's the only official, kind of striped crosswalk. So again, that's a fairly low cost item. Get some paint and have someone go out there and paint some crosswalks. And there may be future, bulb outs or things that make sense in the future to do to make that even better, but we could at least start with just a crosswalk, And I'm sure there's plenty of other places in town that don't have a striped crosswalk that, those really make a difference. I mean, I remember when I moved to town before we had the bump outs and the crosswalks across Main Street, like there were no crosswalks, like at Calder or the post office. You just had to like cross Main Street on your own. There was nothing striped, and it was really wide without those bump outs. So that really makes a difference, and drivers recognize those, and it draws some attention to pedestrians.
Just Morris Street being there for 20 years, that is a street that people drive like 55, 60. I've clocked, I mean, I haven't clocked them, but some people, it's crazy. It is so dangerous. I wouldn't feel comfortable with a crosswalk there unless we can do something about the speeding issue. And I wouldn't ride my bike there. I wouldn't cross the street. I wouldn't ride my bike there. It's really, it's a problem. The amount of speed.
And they don't have enough speed limit signs anywhere. I mean, there's one just around the corner here, and I don't see one coming. Maybe I've missed it, but
I don't know if there is a sign. That's interesting. I don't know if there is a sign there, but going around that corner from it's like pretty mayhem down there.
So that was identified as a potential for a protected bike lane by swapping the current bike lane with the parking. So that to me is kind of a more low-hanging fruit because it's just paint. So that could be
definitely,
something
and that also moving the parked cars further inboard
makes it narrower,
yeah. Visually narrower, and makes cars kind of slow down. So kind of a couple paint jobs on Morris Street could do a lot of benefit. I'm wondering, I'm sorry, I don't know if this was in the report or not, but if there are any kind of, because I think a lot of this, part of it is, making people more comfortable with the biking and walking facilities, but it also is, we're Americans, and our first instinct is just to go get in our car to go somewhere. So I wonder if there's programs or like, how do you encourage that change in mindset to actually get people to think, instead of, oh, I need to go to Whole Foods to pick up a couple of things, I'm just jump in my car, to, oh, I need to go to Whole Foods, I'm going to get on my bike. Is there, like, how do we change that mindset? That's kind of a big, maybe philosophical question, but if there's any, suggestions, I think that'd be kind of programs or things the city could do to kind of help, like different bike events and things to get people comfortable with how to get through town and comfortable biking. And I know the Bike Coalition does kind of some of those things, but I think kind of trying to focus on, we live in a very small town. It's really easy to walk or bike almost anywhere you need to go in town within 10, 15 minutes for most people. But yet a lot of us drive to get across town, to go to the hardware store, to go to Lucky, or go to wherever you're going to go. And how do you change the mode in people's brain? So if any has a good ideas about that, I think that'd be great to include. And just to think about us as a community, what kind of events and things that can we do to help people kind of get into a different mindset in terms of transportation?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, that is touched on in the policy section. We have some policies around education, youth education, and then encouragement, like continuing the bike to work day or bike to wherever day and things like that. But, if people have specific ideas, we can add that in there too. And then at the countywide plan, they also have kind of more programmatic recommendations at the countywide level. And the city is supportive of the countywide.
I think, I've seen so many videos on YouTube of, bike buses, if we can encourage the schools to, every school had a bike bus, that would be awesome. It's so exciting to see, like, hundreds of kids with their parents kind of riding bikes to school every day. And that really, especially for kids, because kids don't have cars and they only get around town on their bikes and walking, and helping to instill kind of how to do that safely and confidently, I think is a good objective.
Great. Yeah, and then I'm going to invite Jeff to respond to maybe some of the questions that came up too.
I've heard a lot of questions, and I just wanted to provide some information. So I'm Jeff Rubendahl with Fair and Peers. I'll be presenting next about the downtown study, which is a natural evolution. Eleanor's also helping with that. My colleagues are more involved in the detailed ATP, but just information. So the way for between the comments about we don't want bike boulevards everywhere because XYZ. Putting a sharer on the roadway does not create a bike boulevard. That creates what's called a bike route. That's not what we're trying. We're trying to advocate for more neighborhood greenways, similar to what have been discussed in the past, that actually force volume and speeds down so that it generates a more comfortable place to ride. So if it's not comfortable to ride within sharing the road, it's not a bike boulevard. So just wanted to clarify that there is a distinction there. And then there's actually really a lot of evidence research and at the federal level through FHWA about how best to identify the appropriate bike facility given speeds, volumes, number of lanes. There's a chart. It's not in the next presentation, but we'll make sure that it's part of the appendix. It's in the plan where it actually shows a function of where the volume and speeds are, where a separated bike facility and a shared facility is most appropriate. So I just wanted to clarify that there's actually a lot of research, and that's the guidance there. Responding to the low-hanging fruit comment, some cities, and something we can look into here, they've actually identified policies where they require the city to look through the bike plan for striping only changes that can happen as part of maintenance projects, whether it's putting in crosswalks, putting in new parking, delineation and other traffic stripes. And that's kind of a sunk cost already because you're already repaving or doing something similar. So that's an example of a strong low-hanging fruit opportunity. And then since Dana from SCTA isn't here, SCTA is initiating an SS4A, which is Safe Streets for All grant, which includes a countywide speed limit study, which includes looking at actual data and developing policies at the county level appropriate for all local agencies to identify the streets that are within a certain proximity to downtown centers and other things where legally a city can make the changes to reduce the speed limits. So that's happening at the county level, and you'll likely hear from more about that from SCTA in the coming months, I think. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, there's no further comments. I appreciate everyone's input on this. And again, we have until November 30th to make any more comments, and then this will be coming back. Will it come back to the commission in a final form, or just the council?
No, just the council.
Okay.
Yeah. So it'll go to council November 19th and still in draft form.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the comment period ends, the final version will get drafted and then submitted to city council for final adoption. It'll be early
Right.
25.
Great. Thank you. All right, then moving on in our agenda, we are going to go to the item 7B, the Sustainable Transportation Grant, and we'll start with the staff report, and then I guess Jeff will continue on from there.
Sure. So I'll just give a kind of brief overview on the project. On August 31st of 2023, the city of Sebastopol was awarded a Sustainable Transportation Grant from the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, titled Sebastopol Main Street State Highways Sub-Regional Planning and Core Redesign. The grant awarded amount was $230,178 with a local match of $29,822, which brings the total of $260,000. Some of the project overall objectives, I'll go through a couple here and we'll kind of discuss them a little bit further in the presentation. But enhancing multimodal safety, accessibility, and comfort to help make downtown Sebastopol a more desirable place to walk, bike, or use transit. Encouraging mode shift to reduce vehicle travel and increase the use of alternative transportation modes to support the city's greenhouse gas reduction goals. Reduce the negative impacts of regional traffic through the downtown of Sebastopol, including truck traffic. Develop consensus with Caltrans, County of Sonoma, and the City of Santa Rosa regarding recommended improvements to enhance regional circulation on selected roadways in the vicinity of Sebastopol and supports the preferred alternative for downtown. And lastly, engage disadvantaged residents in the planning process to identify and address their mobility priorities. So with that, I will conclude this report. Happy to answer any questions, but we do have a presentation from Jeff to go over.
Any questions before we get to the presentation? All right, Jeff, take it away.
All right. Thank you. Thanks again. Again, Jeff Rubendahl with Fair and Peers, project manager for the study, working with John. Eleanor is one of our key sub-consultants, as well as some urban design and civil engineering support as well. We've termed our study Reimagining the Core, a vision for mobility and vitality in downtown Sebastopol. We really want to build on the great work that's happening, as has been happening over the last many years, most recently with the ATP, and really leverage some new Caltrans design standards that are very supportive of the themes that you guys have heard a lot about, that are about safety, connectivity, and access about in the downtown area. This is not a bike project. This is an all people project, trying to make downtown the vision that we've all been talking about for some time now. Next page. So tonight I'm going to give a kind of an update, kind of a quick overview. John took some of the first slides, which is totally fine. Talking a little bit about some of the work we've been doing over the last few months, our participation and engagement plan that Eleanor Leshner is leading, as well as some of our upcoming events that we encourage all you all to participate in, and to talk through a little bit more about the process of the project and kind of the steps and phases and how we get to it, including the implementation and roadmap component of it as well. So next page. So you can step through these. These are the study objectives summarized that John mentioned. If you want to just go click by click, it's really understanding multimodal safety, access, and comfort, encouraging mode shift for both, for just to get people, make it for a safer environment, mitigate the negative impacts of regional through traffic, and engage the downtown businesses to really have them be part of the solution. Next page. So the area of this study is really focused. It is a Caltrans grant, so we are focusing our efforts on the Caltrans roadways and the kind of sphere of influence as it relates to land uses and access to and from the roadway. It's not limited to the Caltrans right of way, but it's primarily understanding what we can do within Caltrans right of way to make things more consistent with the local community's interests and values. Next page. So this is a lot of words just to describe what our general scope of work includes. We've been evaluating reading a lot of the data and reports that have been developed so far, developing a series of existing conditions maps that I'll walk through a little bit later. There's a considerable community engagement and participation component, which we'll also describe tonight. Talking through the process of identifying the visions, goals, and the basis of our traffic and ops and analysis to really understand what moving through downtown by different modes would look and feel like with these different alternatives. Then looking at the more regional level, what does cut through traffic and other regional transportation improvements do to help alleviate that or maybe exacerbate that, and trying to understand how best what we do in downtown can influence what we want, but also understand that there are external influences about that. We'll talk more about the other agencies that are involved in those discussions. We'll also identify alternatives, develop probably 2 or 3 that's come to the surface, and then develop some planning level cost estimates and an implementation plan of the preferred alternative, building on the funding opportunities identified in the ATP, but really in this case, understanding what happens this year, what happens in the next 2 years, what happens in the next 5 years. So there's a roadmap for staff and the community to follow after the end of the study. Next page. So generally, a high level, our approach for the participation of this project is really community first. And many of you have been involved for many years, trying to get downtown to be more about people and be about more safe access and connectivity. And we want to just bring everybody together and really put some pen to paper with you all as partners as part of that. We're proposing a 3-phased engagement, which in kind of this first phase that we're in now is really just hearing more from folks in the community. We've met with some stakeholders. We're meeting with more stakeholders over the next few weeks. We have a workshop here in the next week or so, or we'll get to it in the next 3 or 4 weeks to really workshop and learn more from you all about your lived experiences. Next page. So we're going to use a variety of mechanisms to seek input, provide updates, and really collaborate with members of the community and staff and other stakeholders. It's a series of in-person meetings, online presence, things like online surveys, just summarizing all the great work that's been done to date and visualizing it in a way that is usable and understandable for many. Next page. I guess it's going to start with us on Thursday, November 14th. We're planning from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. a workshop and open house that will include It's kind of a come as you are available. No, it's not required for somebody to be there the whole time. To really pop in, all of this information will be sent out as part of our website launch as well. But it's really an opportunity to learn about what the work we've been doing, and for us to learn about your lived experiences, some interactive pieces to understand what the, where should travel lanes be, where should bike facilities be, looking at plan views and understanding access and walkability to Central Park and other key places we want to be, and really just help us gather more information so we can develop 5 to 10 ideas for getting people around downtown more safely and more comfortably. There is also going to be an area that is kind of oriented towards kids and folks so if childcare is an issue, I would encourage folks to bring their little ones. We'll have some coloring stations and have them be active in the activity as well. Light snacks, beverages, and again, come for as little or as long as you want, and we'll be able to do plenty of things with the group as well. Next page. So this is a QR code to the survey component of the website. Starting tonight, the website is live. The website will have this presentation, a video of this presentation, as well as downloadable links to previous plans, all the information that anybody would want to read through. And we'll make sure that this will also be publicized through the city's email blasts that lag a bit. So the website is live, but it'll take a while to go out in mailers and whatnot. We're also developing a flyer to give to local businesses to promote in their shops if they choose to. So we're really just trying to get the word out. Tell your friends, tell your loved ones that there's information out there. The city has a website that'll be linked to the project-specific element that has a lot of the documents, and we'll be updating this over time. This is not something that we're doing now and then letting it go. Everything we do will have a component with an online presence in addition to all the in-person feedback that we're doing. Next page. So this is just a quick run through of some of the maps we've developed. It's more just a visualization of some of the inputs that we're looking into as part of this. This is the kind of the land use characteristics. This is the land use map of the downtown area, recognizing that the mixed commercial downtown uses all have a mixture of density and uses, understanding that there are several parks, community facilities, and really understanding where the land use and transportation realms meet and where those natural synergies are to help one inform the other, so that decisions aren't made in a vacuum. Next page. So this is a depiction of the downtown streets. The dark gray is all the asphalt in downtown. As you can see, it's a lot of it. The blue lines are areas where on-street parking is allowed. The green lines represent some of the bikeways. I will echo or just build off the previous presentation. The current buffered bike lanes in downtown are good, but they do not meet the current standard for facilities of that type in this context. Caltrans in the last couple of years has updated their own complete streets design guidelines, and basically, given the volumes and speeds in the downtown, the only 2 types of bike facilities that Caltrans would allow, if built today, are a separated Class 4 and a Class 1 facility. So one of the key elements that will go into this is we are going to provide dedicated, separated bike facilities through downtown, and how we configure them is where all the fun happens. Whether it's on the same street, separate streets, multiple streets, and really understanding how it interfaces with all the land uses, and then recognizing that travel lanes and turn pockets and intersection traffic control matter, and we'll be modeling that using a series of different tools and using data from the regional demand model and a whole bunch of other data that is probably even some of it's too much for me sometimes. But we'll be modeling quite a bit of things to understand where to trade off between safety, access, and congestion, and just getting people through and or deterring them to other areas outside of the downtown area. Next slide. This depiction is a very simplistic version of what's out there today in terms of bike facilities, different colors being different categories of bike facility. Within the area of the project, we would identify the appropriate elements to upgrade and modify as part of the study. Next page. You can't really quite see it at the scale, but this shows where there are sidewalks, where there are high visibility crosswalks, the ladder style, basic crosswalks, or no crosswalks at all, to really understand how pedestrians walk along the street, across the street, where are those gaps, and understanding the opportunities for sidewalk widening or need for sidewalk widening. Next page. recognizing that there is transit service in the downtown, and we want to make sure that we're capitalizing as much as we can on the frequency of those services. There's quite a bit of arrows on this because it's all directional, so the buses actually have to circulate through downtown quite a bit. So anything that we do that does affect turns or ability for buses to move through the area will need to be taken into account. Next page. There's quite a bit of surface parking and on-street parking provided in the downtown. This highlights all facilities. It doesn't necessarily identify all public available lots, but it does show in the bright yellow that there's quite a bit of space dedicated to storing of vehicles, quite a bit of areas where parking is not allowed, but we will be looking at where and how to accommodate parking where it makes the most sense as one of the things that we'll be evaluating as part of the study. Next page. So this is a map identifying the collisions history, building off of this the countywide high injury network that you mentioned and the ATP. And also to clarify, a high injury network can be built a couple different ways. It does, in the case of the countywide one, it does include all modes, but it is a high injury network, meaning where are the ones that actually result in injury the most, and the most vulnerable of users are people walking and biking. So it naturally is the higher injury corridors likely have insufficient bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So that's the correlation. We have all the data, and you can cut it up by mode if you want to, but a lot of the same results occur. The same corridors, big arterials with high speeds and lack of infrastructure pop up to the surface. Next page. So this is just a summary of some of the recommendations from past plans, including the local road safety plan, the 2021 safety study along SR 116, to really understand what are the work that's already done to date, how applicable is it for the work now. The answer is all of it is applicable, but how can we then inform the alternatives and the ideas to make sure that we are either using these exactly or making sure that the projects include the safety elements that are identified in these previous plans. So at a high level, the schedule is based on the grant requirement will end at the end of 2025, meaning from right now we're in phase one, which is kind of the information data gathering input phase. We'll be developing a series of alternatives over the winter and early into 2025, working with the community during each step with the idea of next spring and summer having a few alternatives, perhaps a preferred alternative, and coming back to this group or other city groups to get feedback along the way. One thing I didn't mention, and it's not explicit in the schedule either, but we also have we are also developing assembling a technical agency working group, which includes members from city services and departments like police and fire, transit agencies, City of Santa Rosa, County of Sonoma, SCTA, and other regional agencies to help make sure that what we are looking at, what we're evaluating, matches up with what they're expecting and answer any questions that they may have. So that, because nothing happens in a vacuum, and we want to make sure that what we are doing has elements that support other ongoing work at the county and regional level. So in terms of next steps, I'll wrap it up here. So the website will get the word out. I suggest folks to check it out, read up, ask questions. There's a little comment box. Bring the comments in as much as you can. Thursday, November 14th, we'll be having a workshop and open house. Again, a lot more information to come on that. Like I mentioned, winter that we'll be more developing, taking the input from the workshop and from other conversations we're having and comments from the website and the survey to identify a bunch of different ideas of how to make it more comfortable and safer and to move around downtown. And then over the course of the next 15 months, coming back in front of the community at large and this body as well, and to really kind of get into the details and the develop an implementation plan for the preferred alternative as we finalize this study in late 2025. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you all have.
Thank you. Any questions at this time? Go ahead, Seth.
How much influence do we have over Caltrans?
To clarify, what can we do? What can the city do on the roads that Caltrans has ownership over?
Yes.
You have to follow Caltrans's processes and guidelines, but they have a new guideline that even includes a picture of downtown Sebastopol as an example of a rural downtown. which basically says lanes should not be greater than a certain width. Bikeways should be protected if the speeds are of a certain height. The speed limit should be a maximum of XYZ. So it's actually a pretty strong case for a lot of the themes that I've heard here tonight, and that's been in previous studies. So it's still Caltrans, so there's still a lot of processes to wait to screen out. What does it mean operationally? What does it mean from an environmental impact element? So there's still a lot of hurdles, but they've given a guidebook to all agencies that have state facilities through their towns that gives them something to sink their teeth into.
Okay, thank you.
Seth, I'll also include Caltrans is one of the additional authorities as part of that advisory committee group. So they'll be kind of informed of what we're doing throughout the process. So it's not going to be, we're not going to do all this work and then dump it off on Caltrans and then say, no, we don't want any of this. They'll be kind of involved in the process throughout. So,
okay, great. I mean, I understand that the emphasis of this is about safety and it's about mobility, but there's also a design aspect to this. I mean, at least one of these intersections is a gateway into town, and frankly, it's not great currently. No disrespect, it looks like engineers designed it, and I think we can do better. So I hope that there's an opportunity for us to influence the aesthetic of this as well, so that the way you arrive in town is elevated.
As a registered civil and traffic engineer,
No
I won't
offense.
take that offense.
No offense intended.
But I will say that I alone am not working on this project. I've got Eleanor with Eleanor Leshner Planning, as well as a bunch of planners at Fair and Piers and urban planners to really understand the land use component of it. And the stakeholder group that we've been talking to has some great folks and some great input as well. So it's definitely a community.
It's part of the conversation.
Piece. Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
And I will say that the Caltrans and the state law legislation that's out there really supports not increasing capacity and really making decisions based on the safety outcomes and the environmental benefits, rather than getting more cars through downtown, getting more trucks through downtown. While at the same time, there does need to be commercial trucks to businesses and getting through downtown to get in other places that need those needs. So there's a series of graphics in that Caltrans design standard that actually identify the modal priority. Whose has the priority in downtown that goes through a rural city like Sebastopol, and it prioritizes the most vulnerable, people walking and biking, but it acknowledges that you do need to accommodate folks to get through and get through and get around.
Okay, thank you for that.
I just want to add on to that, there is part of the design, as part of the team, the consultant team, there are urban designers. So that, and my understanding is that, the final plan will have those kind of details too, like what kind of street trees, street furniture, lighting, all those kind of elements that go into, a street design. It's not just going to be about the engineering. It will be, design components. So hopefully, I'm imagining you had someone from that team at this November meeting to kind of, so people can give their feedback about those kind of design elements as well, not just the safety and security elements, but
and really engaging business folks. Sorry to interrupt. And really engaging business folks that live and work downtown to really, that are part of this whole process as well.
Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I will let you know if any other questions, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment, I will open it for public comment now. Come up to the podium if you're in the room. Come on up, Roberta.
About bike lanes on one side where we're riding in opposite directions. In the California Vehicle Code, we are a vehicle. We are asked to travel with the flow of traffic. And there's a good reason for that. If I'm traveling against traffic, there will be a point at which I'm going to be on the wrong side of a driver emerging from a side street. So that's an issue. Also about anything that involves painting on the streets, it's pretty useless. And that's because the driver's eyes are here, not there. So what you need to do is something that will catch their eye. And last, I am, among other things, continue to be a member of the Santa Rosa Southeast Greenway campaign committee. And what we experienced is a couple of years ago, there was a big staffing change in regional Caltrans, and those folks became a lot more cooperative. And now, as you saw, we have seen the purchase of the land. And that was because Caltrans moved it along. So there's.
Thank you. Anyone online like to make a comment on this item? Go ahead, Phil. Unmute yourself.
I just want to express some gratitude for this process, and I'm grateful for the opportunities to bring some more people in the November meeting. So I just wanted to say thank you to Fair and Pierce.
All right, anyone else in the room? Steve, come on up.
I would also second, thanks for all the work that you've done. I learned not too long ago that the state did change the rules that we could reduce our speeds from 25 to 20 in the downtown without as many hoops as there used to be. So I'm encouraged that that's a direction that we might be able to find in Sebastopol without spending years of study and expenses around that. I guess I want to follow up on the question I had earlier. That here we spent $267,000. What's the 1.284 million in the corridor study in the active transportation plan? So yeah, I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. Maybe staff can answer that. And then lastly, I'm also very heartened to see what I thought was early on in the process of the RFP. It said that two-way streets had to be one of the designed or studied items. And I thank the consultants that doesn't appear to be the case, that we're not elevating something before we have a sense of the process to determine the priority of what should be analyzed. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Linda. You can unmute yourself and make your comment. Can you mute yourself, Linda?
Oh, there. So anyway, sometimes I get a little discouraged about all these plans and everything, of the development that's going on over here near where I live. You know, there's a 96-unit, 3-story monstrosity that's in the works over behind O'Reilly, the Canopy Project, which according to their environmental impact report is supposed to create 684 vehicle trips per day, in addition to the gridlock that we already have on Healdsburg Avenue and 116 here downtown. They did not take into consideration in their traffic report the traffic at the intersection of 12 and 116. And at the end of the day, everything that they analyzed and stuff, they found that there was no significant impact on our crumbling and failed water and sewage infrastructure too. So anyway, what needs to be done traffic-wise, you know, they need to start looking at it. When they used to, you know, nobody's talked about it recently, bypasses like down Bloomfield Road. We need to alleviate the traffic and the bypass on Occidental. But in addition to that, no discussion is complete about without considering the amount of radiation that we are all exposed to by our cell phones, the cell towers, the power lines, the magnetic off of that. We are cooking ourselves alive with this invisible hazard that is well documented and measurable, and needs to be taken into consideration in every plan, the transportation, the housing, and everything. This is not, you know, we're not in Kansas City anymore, you know, it's or Kansas. this is a whole new world we're living in with all the technology, which is adversely affecting us and causing
2 minutes are up. Thanks, Linda.
cancer and all kinds of other problems. It needs to be taken into
Thank you,
consideration.
Linda. Anyone else in the room like to make a comment? Come on up, Lars.
Good evening. I'm Lars Langberg, architect here in town, chair of the Design Review Board, and just wanted to thank you for this work so far, and really just speak to this as a starting point, planting a seed. You mentioned sort of projects that could happen in 1, 2, or 5 years. I would really like to encourage us to think about 10 to 20 years, that the downtown, we all know, needs so much work. It should be completely transformed. And if we think of short-term fixes, which we've had a lot of, we're not going to get to the town we all really want. So I think that that's just something we all have to keep in mind. We, on our Planning Commission, Design Review, our staff, what is the vision that we really want for this town? We can make it happen, but we have to think really long term. I think the regional emphasis on this and the active transportation plan is so good and so important. We're not going to solve this as a town of Sebastopol without the help of the county of Sonoma. So I just want to throw that out there. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. We'll go back online to M. Kelly. Can you unmute yourself, please?
Hi, thanks for everyone's work on this. We have 2 highways running through our town. So with a town of less than 2 miles, the focus seems to be on some of this discussion on downtown. But if you look at Redwood Market Center down to Safeway, that has become a real speed corridor. We've increased traffic with merging the high schools. And I was real curious to know if we can really have the speed limits reduced. My question.
Did you have any other questions? Was that it? Do you have any other statements or questions?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Coming up, Melissa. I'm sorry, we will get to try to answer that question, but after we get to all the comments.
Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Hanley. I'm an architect. I'm also the vice chair on the DRB, Design Review. Thank you so much for all your work on this. This is amazing. It's really wonderful to have this come to Sebastopol, to have this sort of work done. I would really hope that part of this process is going to be a regional assessment of some of the impacts of Sebastopol. We have so much through traffic. We just heard about the 2 free highways that come through town. So many folks coming through downtown are not staying here. They're not spending money here. They're not really utilizing all the wonderful parts of Sebastopol. I know a bypass was something that has been considered many, many times. I think the last time it got shut down was in 1989. If we're not thinking about a regional approach to this problem of through traffic, I think we're missing the mark. We can paint everything on the roads. We're not going to solve the problem. The other thing I really hope is part of this is going to be a transit hub in Sebastopol. This will impact our parking requirements. It'll impact our density opportunities and development opportunities. So if we're not thinking about actually a regional transit hub in Sebastopol, I think, again, we're missing an opportunity. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call. Okay, I'm going to close public comment. And Jeff, I'm sorry I didn't get that question the first time around, Steve, on the earlier item, but do you know what this, do you know anything about this corridor study, the $1.2 million that he was referring to? Eleanor, do you have that? Yeah, please come up so we can hear you on the recording.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that question, Steve. I had to go look in the plan myself to see where that number was coming from. And what I'm seeing is in the cost estimates for the ATP, the cost estimates are like quite high level, and it looks at what is the facility type, how many miles do we have in town, and then it just multiplies it by a general number of like average cost Bay Area wide to do X miles of that type of project. So it's not necessarily saying this will definitely cost this amount. It's for like a high level cost estimating exercise, but we could maybe look at that number specifically for Sebastopol. Hope that helps.
And then we have a question about Healdsburg Avenue speed limits. What kind of control do we have on that?
So the downtown study is downtown. It's where the two highways intersect, Highway 12 and SR 116. It doesn't go as far north as Safeway, but the county safety speed limit settings program and study will address kind of from the county level down, the type of policies that can be enforced at the local level. And the state law has that as well. One thing is proximity to a downtown center. So the closer you are to Sebastopol downtown, the more likely you are to qualify to make those measures to reduce the speed limit. We've given a couple other elements of a checklist. I'm not an expert in that field, but I do know that the county will have more to share on that in the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
And our work will be informed alongside SCTA's work there. So that reducing of the speed limit is one of the elements that will help and be built into the alternatives that we study. You want me to speak to some of the other questions?
Sure.
So mention just real quick, planting the seed. This isn't the seed. This is 10 to 15 years beyond. The seed was planted by others as part of the ESTA. So this is really just, we now have a grant funding. Staff is able to do this. And we're basically, we're like the storm bringing more water, like just to get to stimulate the growth. The regional assessment, there is a huge task included in our study that looks at the regional model, and whatever the preferred alternative or top 2 or 3 will then be put into that regional model to understand how cut-through traffic would be anticipated to change. And we have other models to be able to understand what that is. So we'll be able to understand how many people are driving through Sebastopol, how many people are driving to and from Sebastopol, and what are the levers that the project can include to help alleviate the impacts of those folks. And then were there any other questions? I think that was all I wrote down.
I didn't have any other questions in particular, but there was a comment made about the two-way, looking at the two-way streets.
The grant does require that the study include understanding changing of the one-way couplet, but it doesn't require that it changes anything. So the way that our approach is, we're going to understand what people want to see, whether it's safer crossings, easier and safer bike facilities, and understanding how we get people through there safely with all the different modes. And I would envision probably 5 to 10 different ideas for how to change intersections and corridors to accomplish all of those objectives, and then understand how many of them have the viability based on the industry standards for what they are. The grant stipulates that one of the alternatives that is evaluated also doesn't change downtown level of service, meaning that you can't take away lanes. You can probably reduce lanes. It's going to be very much limited to intersection safety improvements and things that are great, but not transformative as described before. So it's really understanding what are those brackets of improvements and packages that get to those desired outcomes identified by the community.
Can you also speak to the, so once we get to the end of this grant and we have a preferred plan, what is the kind of funding world look like in terms of actually implementing? And is that, to Laura's point, something that would be, we would take pieces of it and implement it over time versus, look, we got this plan, can we just do the whole thing all at once? Like, what's the likelihood of that happening?
You'd have to have a very large bake sale. The end result of the plan will be to have a concept of a preferred alternative that includes intersection treatments, corridor changes, things of that nature, with pairing a myriad of funding opportunities, recognizing that this project is close to a downtown, on a state facility, has a high injury element to it. It checks a lot of the boxes that makes it very, that supports grant funding to do more actual design, implementation. I am guessing that the end result is going to be a very large capital investment that can't be done with one big grant, but that can be done over time, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and in ways that is every step is a step towards an ultimate goal of what that is. And recognizing that there are opportunities, and whether they're grants, maintenance projects, other elements, safe routes to school studies that can help continue building out that vision as well.
Thank you. Any other? Go ahead, Debbie.
I would like to address some of the questions that the public came up, probably for you to answer, I'm thinking. There has been talk over the years of a bypass, but one of the things that concerns me the most is the way that I have seen things done in Sebastopol, or people get really excited and we see this really great plan and it takes this immediate, what's going on right now. But I agree with looking 10, 20, 30 years out of what we want this city to look like, and maybe give up that excitement of this immediate gratification in looking for something that is going to be sustainable for the future. So, looking at a bypass, I just don't think that the infrastructure or the traffic issues can be solved. Especially you're looking at this very small area, but this very small area is impacted by a lot going on around it. So already we're seeing in the close to 40 years I've been here, getting from Mill Station and Highway 116 to downtown in the middle of the day can take so long, people won't even come through. I won't go through town anymore. I go the other way. So my concern is, are we looking for this, are we really looking for something that's 10, 20, 30, taking all the, the traffic, the infrastructure, not just the small area, but how it's impacted? And have we looked at a bypass again? I think you said it was 1989. But, I imagine I was here in 1989 and already the amount of traffic addition since 1989 and all these new projects that have just been approved. And I could go on and on and on. I'm concerned that we're going to end up with like our downtown now. I mean, I don't quite understand the downtown square, that design. It's not used very often because it's not, I don't know a word. It's not cohesive or inviting. So how do we make sure that what we're adapting now and what are your, strategies?
We're going to look at the downtown core that I showed and really focus on how we can change the roadway and adjacent public infrastructure, public right of way in that downtown area. And on the regional level, we're not identifying where bypasses should go. Those have actually all been identified over the years. And we're looking, actually, that's where we're working with Sonoma County, SCTA, and other agencies to understand those regionally significant projects that have made its way into the long-term land use and transportation infrastructure changes that the county is accepting. So it's building off the idea of the bypass, and our work will identify what the city and the community within Sebastopol want to do in the downtown with and without external stuff. So what, for example, just a hypothetical, if the downtown was going to eliminate a turn or to reduce a lane, and there's the same amount of cars want to come through here, there's a travel time through the downtown with and without that regionally significant bypass or corridor improvement project. So that we're not saying that that the city shouldn't proceed with the downtown work, but there is more emphasis on what's happening at the regional level to help alleviate that congestion, whether it's GHG benefit, travel time, quality of life benefit, a bunch of different ways to look at it. And our study will evaluate those known projects outside of the downtown to recognize how travel demand and routing of folks would change. So, for example, bring it back to the implementation plan, I could see there being a situation where the project in downtown is, call it a $10 million project. There's a $5 million regional improvement that's going to make it more comfortable and easier for people to get around Sebastopol. So that's part of the dialogue of when does the city and the community take most advantage of regionally available and countywide funds to kind of help get those bypass or alleviating improvements in place, because nothing happens in a vacuum, as you mentioned. It's you kind of while the city of Sebastopol is developing that vision and those steps to get a better downtown, the county and SCTA and other cities, Santa Rosa, is doing other things to alleviate their own regionally significant areas. Like the Fulton interchange that SCTA is studying now has dramatic benefits of providing a better way for people to not have to drive through downtown Sebastopol. So it's related, but not, you have to do this in order to do this. It's more of evaluating what we have control over as a local agency, but also what the city benefits from more regionally important decisions. Sorry, long-winded way of saying it's complicated, but it's going to be part of the narrative as part of the study.
Other comments or questions?
Just you mentioned the town square. That is actually one of the tables for the community workshop. We want to learn more about that square and what we can do to make it better, including a couple all the big ideas that folks have. So it's come with some creativity and ideas, and we'll bring the markers and the butcher paper.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, and look forward to the meeting on the 14th. Hope people can attend. All right, do people need a break, or should we just continue on?
Let's keep going.
All right. Next item on our agenda is to discuss the Design Review Board and Planning Commission combination. Go ahead, John.
So as you're aware, the City of Sebastopol considering the reorganization of certain boards, committees, and commissions as part of its ongoing budget review process. We did bring this item to the Planning Commission a couple times earlier this year. May 14th was the last time we discussed this. And with that, we provided you with a potential makeup of this combined group. Those are listed as the first set of bullet points here. After that meeting, the May 14th meeting, most of you provided additional comments to staff and how you felt about the combination of these groups, mostly being that they could be beneficial for both staff and applicants, as it would streamline the process for getting development projects through the necessary requirements. In addition to above, staff is recommending a final proposal to this group that breaks down the makeup of the proposed 7 members. We would like to have a discussion and action on the bulleted items listed below at tonight's meeting. This will allow staff to provide a recommendation to the city manager for their report to city council in early 2025. So the bulleted items here are the combined board, Planning Commission DRB membership would be expanded to 7 members, with membership to include at least 1 architect, 1 landscape architect, and 1 allied construction industry member. We would continue with in-person and Zoom participation for meetings, and we would continue with the same schedule of 2 meetings per month at 6 p.m. in this room here. We did bring this same recommendation and discussion to the Design Review Board earlier this afternoon. There were some modifications to how they want to proceed forward with this group. Jane and I are happy to go into those a little bit more detail, but just want to open it up for any further discussion, as this will be kind of the last time that we bring this discussion up to this group, because we do want to make a formal recommendation that the city manager can take to council.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Can a review period be put on this so that we get a chance to see what it's like for 12 months, and then if it's not having the desired outcome, go back to the city council and say, look, we tried this, and it's just a question.
I think it's possible. The issue is that it'll take an ordinance change. We'll have to actually change the city code, and that's quite a process in order to combine them. So then we would have to, if we were going to undo it, we would have to go back through that process again, but nothing's impossible.
Okay. Well, I guess if it's undoable, then we don't need it. All right.
I mean, we are combining them, so we could always uncombine them.
I'm just asking a question.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure.
I
Debbie?
actually will just say that I really appreciated the public comment on this, or the public from the other people on the design review, because I thought it was very thoughtful and very thought out. I don't know what happened in the meeting, and unfortunately I'm going to leave, but I do feel like it doesn't diversify the decision making enough in the city, and I also feel like it is a different skill set and talent set. And I like your suggestion of having architects and, I think that's important, but then we also lose some of the people on the planning commission, who bring other sensibilities such as being business, or just, different types of things. And I also think it goes back to sometimes Sebastopol thinking short term instead of long term. It was another public comment, which was, yes, we're in a financial crisis right now, but if we look 5-10 years out from now, this will probably resolve. So will this be worth it? I appreciate the seamlessness of it, and maybe there's another way to have it be seamless, because I also think just being a volunteer additionally, it's a lot, and we often have issues with people even wanting to be in these positions, and now we're going to ask for probably longer meetings. And so just my 2 cents.
Kathy, any thoughts or? Okay. Anyone else questions or anything? Okay. I will open this up for public comment. Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak about this?
All right. Hi, guys. So I was really interested to read Lynn's comment to you, because those comments were not made in our meeting today, and they are a minority opinion based on the consensus reached by our board. I think there's generally support for combining the boards, that we can shorten the process for folks trying to do projects, that we can create a more efficient process, that we can move a design review earlier in the process is really exciting. We did provide some additional comments on this memo, and I'm sure the staff will provide you with exactly what we said. I don't want to characterize those incorrectly, so I'll let them provide that. But generally, there's support in combining these from the board. And I think that one public comment that you've received is not indicative of what our board feels.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll go out to Zoom, and I see Linda, if you want to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Well, as you know, I attended the earlier meeting this afternoon, and there were some very relevant comments by the board members in opposition to the consolidation of these groups, and I am with that. I see this as just a big waste of time. Instead of paring down the input, we need to expand the input from the public and these groups. This is just actually what it is, in my opinion. And I try to pay attention. This is a way to get Lynn Dietler and her name, it'll come to me. But anyway, to silence them, because Diana Rich, the mayor, has been trying to silence us every way she can, reducing public comments to 2 minutes, trying to get rid of Zoom. But anyway, I am absolutely, this is just another big waste of time, this process, and we need to keep and get more input from the public. We've got so many talented people in this town. Some of them have just given up speaking on public comment because they know they are not being heard. They do not have a seat at the table. They are on the menu, in fact.
Seconds.
So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Linda. Next in the room, anyone? All right, we'll go back to Zoom. We'll go with M. Kelly. You can unmute yourself and make your comment, please.
I think Phil was before me, but my question is really short. I would have liked to seen or understood what the DRB recommended. So if that information can be brought forward with additional public comment, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we will get to that. And go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious if there's like an alternative where the planning and design could be more meshed and seamless, but still be separate so that the meetings aren't quite so long and complicated. So if I'm very interested in the design and feedback to be in there, but also seamless with planning, so that it's not difficult for the people trying to get projects through to achieve them. So I was just wondering if there's just some other way to think about how the planning board could sit in a different way, or if that's an option.
Great, thank you for your feedback. I will close public comment, not seeing anyone else wanting to speak, and bring it back to the board for further comments and input to staff. Anyone want to start?
Paul, do you want
So
what the
hear a
DRB
summary?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, give us a
Okay.
summary now, yeah.
So what we got from the DRB was to keep the members to 5 and provide an alternate position. 4 of the 5, which would be somewhat of a design professional, or as Seth provided as part of our one meeting, an allied construction industry member. So that can kind of be a general role. They also wanted to update the design guidelines that are part of the city. Those are not officially adopted. We do have objective design standards, but those are geared towards SB 35 and other affordable housing projects. So having some updated design guidelines that provide objective rules, and then also having an ad hoc committee, which would not be subject to Brown Act, that staff can reach out to if there is a project that needs some additional review. I believe that part of the direction was to possibly have that include one of the members from the design review board and one member of the planning commission, as that was part of their recommendation. I think that was it.
Could you explain what you mean if you don't have a design review and DRB and planning? How do you have representatives from each?
I think they're talking about representatives from each of the existing ones, because yes, there would be one combined body, so it wouldn't be able to be one of each.
So, okay.
Any other questions or feedback?
Yeah, it concerns me that to just have 5, it means that everyone will be kind of in the industry, which is a good thing, but not necessarily have the opinion of people, your average citizen who lives in town. And we want citizens to be involved. And I think that's what you lack when you don't have 7. I also think, from my point of view as a volunteer, it's a whole lot more material to cover. Not that I wouldn't enjoy doing it, because I love those neener parts of DRB as well. But I can see it takes a long time for 7 people to put in their neener bits. So I think that's worth something. But I don't think the difference between 7 and 5 is a financial thing, really. We're not printing packets anymore. There's a couple of chairs. It does take a little more time for everyone to talk, and I think that's a big issue. Maybe that's the main reason to go down to 5, just keep things moving. I just hope things aren't lost in that process.
Yeah, I think the reason that we suggested 7 people was to keep a broad balance on the board. And, at 7 people, I understand more comments means longer meeting, and we also have more material to cover, but it also gives more opportunity for people to join the board who are members of the community, not necessarily professionals, so that it doesn't become too sort of weighted in that direction. There may be some practicality to that we have to flush out in terms of just how many people can you have on a board in one evening with so many things on the agenda. But then that said, I mean, there are weeks where we don't have anything on the agenda, right? And we don't have a meeting. So maybe we'll actually end up using every Tuesday that we have allotted for meetings. That's more of a thought, I guess. In terms of representation of the public, I think actually in some ways when a project can be dealt with in one go, it's one meeting for the public to show up to. They can voice all of their concerns about planning, about the design of the project, impact the community, rather than having to sort of break it up and be told in a meeting, well, actually, I'm sorry, you can't talk about that today. All we're talking about is zoning. You have to come back to the next meeting if you want to talk about design. Now it's 2 evenings out of your month or whatever. So I don't think that this reduces public comment. Actually, it may even encourage it, knowing that you can get it all out in one go. So I throw that out there. That's all I have to say really about that.
We used to be a 7 board member, 8 actually, because we had an alternate. So we were an 8-member board. And I worked for a long time to get us down to 5 because I think it does make for long meetings, and it didn't really, in my mind, in the experience I had when we had an 8-member board versus a 5-member board, I feel like we still have the same level of conversation and the same level of feedback and input. I could see, if the design review board recommendation is 4 of 5 have to be design professionals. I'm willing to dial that back into 2 or 3 design professionals of a 5-member board, or 5-member board plus 1. I mean, I even would be willing to go with a 1-person alternate position. But yeah, I just feel like 5 is sufficient in my experience of being on the bigger board and the smaller board. I'll stop there. I worked at that for a long time, so I do have some personal feelings about that. And I also feel, and I've said this before, like I think this is an opportunity to really rethink the whole process. And I would still encourage us to do that. And I think, and I've suggested this before, of having kind of an ad hoc committee of current Planning Commission and Design Review Board members to think about the process and what can we do to make the process work better. Because as a designer and as a planning commissioner, I could think it's a frustrating process, and I don't think the city gets the best out of the design process, the design review process, just because it just doesn't happen when you need it to happen as a designer. Like I don't get the feedback that I need when I need it as a designer, and I feel like there's a way that we can craft this whole design review process that makes it more useful to get useful feedback when I need the feedback, not when the project is done. And I know we allow preliminary review, but still it's just not the same. You still have to have, a site plan and floor plans and elevations and materials and colors, and like you still need all this information that you basically designed the project, and then you want feedback. Where as a designer, I want feedback on my site plan when I'm working on my site plan. And I want feedback on my elevations when I'm working on my elevations. I waiting until the end of the process to get all that feedback isn't that useful. And so I just don't think it's a helpful process. So I just encourage us to, we can combine the boards or do whatever, that's fine. But I think we should take this opportunity to really rethink the whole process to something that will result in a better outcome for the city. Because I think, there is a lot of compromise made because the design review gets this whole complete package and they're like, well, I don't really like this aspect of it and I don't like this aspect of it, but I feel also that I can't really ask them to redo this because they've spent, $200,000 on this application package already. So I'm just going to ask them maybe to change the color, so like it doesn't really end up in a better project necessarily. It's like just kind of gets sort of like, and I know as a designer, I felt this like being in design review. It's like, fine, I'll give you that. Like, I'm just gonna give it to them because I just don't want to fight about it anymore. And I don't think, again, like that really results in good design. It's just like, okay, you don't like yellow, I'll make it blue because you want it to be blue. Fine. I think the yellow looks better, but whatever. I don't want to argue about this anymore. So I just feel like, yeah, again, I just think that there's an opportunity here if we're rethinking this process to make it a better process, and with the cost savings in mind as well. I just, yeah. So that's my recommendation to staff, and I'm hoping we can carry the conversation on just beyond combining the boards and whatever the city council wants to do in that regard, that really think about how do we make this a better process. And I'd also suggest, if we're going to do this, that I think we should all reapply, like whoever wants to be on this new board, like we all just sort of start from scratch, and not like, oh, we're going to add people just to the planning commission or something like that. Like, put it out to the community.
We
Who
would
wants to
have to
be on this
re-recruit,
new
yeah.
design board, combined design review planning commission, just start over from zero.
We would have to re-recruit. If I can just bring up this, thank you for those comments. You're really aligned with some of the things that the design review board was talking about earlier today. And we are trying to realign the whole process. And they had some of the same concerns from somebody first bringing in a development application, or first coming in to talk about a development application like you do. Not everyone does that. But that's why I think this kind of the planning director's ad hoc committee will be really useful for being able to get that really early feedback. Preliminary review is still something that we encourage, but as you know, not everyone will do preliminary review because it takes too much. So maybe there's a conceptual review that we can do instead, with some line drawings and some scale and mass kind of stuff instead of the whole full renderings. We can certainly talk about something like that. I think we don't ever stop talking about how we can improve the process. And there's so many steps that we can take, and this is one of them. And I think the design review board had some good recommendations for how we can, from the application submittal checklist all the way through, coming in front of the combined board, how we can have a better experience for applicants. And certainly making the existing design guidelines objective so that we have those in place is going to be an important part of that process. But even then, as the board pointed out, there are going to be one-offs. This is Sebastopol. We've got little tiny weird shaped lots with weird slopes and stuff buried under them that we have to preserve and stuff like that. I mean, there's always something. So we're always going to have a choice for a discretionary review where the objective standards may not apply. So it's difficult. We're trying to thread a lot of needles and make it a faster, easier process, a better known process for our applicants. I do agree that for members of the public, coming to one meeting and not being restricted about what they're going to talk about in that meeting is going to be really helpful. I take your guys' direction on the number of people on the committee. I've certainly staffed plenty of planning commissions with 7 and 5 as well, and I wouldn't say 7 are necessarily longer. It all depends on who's sitting on the committee. Am I wrong? I'm not wrong. So I appreciate the comments, Paul, and I think that's exactly probably more important than the cost savings is the fixing the process so that design review is not coming at the end. It's coming up front before a project gets onto the city council.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And I also will reiterate what Seth said. I think, and you just said that I think it's a good to combine because the members of the public can only have to come to one meeting to speak about everything. And also, like, as planning commissioners and projects come to us, a lot of us make comments on the design, and it's like, we're not the design review board, but now we will be, so we can make comments about the design. So I know we all have sort of opinions about that, and sometimes it's hard to hold back those comments when you're looking at a use permit application. You want to talk about the design because you see something you like or don't like or whatever. But so I think that solves that issue, because if we're doing both, then we can make comments about all of that stuff. So, so do you need us to take any action on this, or are you just looking for feedback to take back to the city manager?
We would like to hear your feedback. We would like to hear your feedback and your preferences. We did take a vote at the design review with abstention and 4 in favor of the recommendations as modified. So what we'd like for you to do is look at the last 3 bullet points. One of them is the membership. One of them is continuing to have in-person meetings with the streaming option, which costs more but worth it, right? Because we get more public input. And the last one is to continue the 2 meetings a month. Also, those meetings, this was pointed out by our good design review board, the meetings would be later in the day, so more people who work during the day would be able to participate.
So when are these the 3 bullet points that the same bullet points that the design review board voted on?
They are.
But then they changed it to 5.
Correct. Their recommendation was
for 5.
5 with an alternate.
5 with 4 being design professionals or allied, whatever the word is.
Yeah. So does someone want to make a motion on these 3 bullet points?
Sure, I'll make a motion to adopt the 3 bullet points.
I'll second. I'll second the 3 bullet points that are on this page.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? We'll take a vote.
Okay. Commissioner Odger?
Yes.
Commissioner Burns did leave. Vice Chair Hanley?
Yes.
Chair Fritz?
No.
And Commissioner Fernandez is absent, so that motion dies.
Okay, so let's just take a vote. It's not a formal action, so it's 2 to 1. Yeah, we'll bring that forward. Yeah, absolutely. Yep, exactly.
So I'm sorry, who makes the final decision then about 7 versus 5?
City Council.
Composition of the members. Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, we wanted to ensure that the city manager, before he drafts his final recommendation, right now it's what's in here, before he drafts his final recommendation, that both the design review board and the planning commission had an opportunity to say, okay, here's how we feel about it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on to subcommittee updates. Any subcommittee updates? Kathy?
Yes. Thank you, John, for meeting with the Calder Creek Ives Park group again. I thought it was constructive. I think they are feeling a sense that the Friends of Ives Park can move forward with and implement some ideas by removing the constraints we put on back burners and waiting for the creek restoration. I'm also met this morning with Lawrence Jaffe, who wants to pursue, again, the mural idea. He's thinking of a shorter mural, about maybe 40 feet. He hasn't gone out to measure the site, which would be right by the stage. We were brainstorming who, when, how, what, and of course, encouraging the committee and the decisions they make to come to us. So I guess basically they're saying they would like to pursue that idea, which we had already started working on before, and that working with Dante or Eric, now the current planning department heads, on it for now would be the way to proceed. If you had any ideas about who could take the lead on a project like that, you could let Lawrence know, because we were kind of stumped. We were trying to think of someone in the, a muralist or a stage set designer, because that's kind of what we're doing, building a stage set for the stage.
Maybe reach out to someone from the Center for the Arts. I don't know if they have someone on there.
Yeah, that was a suggestion, to go for the Center for the Arts, and perhaps the Public Arts Commission, which I guess still exists technically. They haven't been disbanded yet. So I don't know whether, they were kind of discouraging before, but maybe changing the scope of the idea would make it easier for them to understand the kind of thing that I had really originally been thinking of, but focusing on one area. And that they also think they have money for it without having to go through their grant process to get the money.
Going on to planning director's report.
Just a few things. The Canopy project has submitted their building permit applications, so those are in review right now. They also have their site improvement plans in. Huntley Square, which is also on Bodega Avenue, 10 units, has their site improvements. I believe they're getting close to submitting their building permit application. The Woodmark project on Bodega was finalized at the beginning of October, so those units are they're going through and qualifying folks to start occupancy there. We had, as part of the presentation earlier today, the workshop for the downtown sustainable transportation grant, so I hope to see folks there. And we will be trying to schedule a joint meeting with the DRB and Planning Commission sometime in January to go over the Barlow Hotel project, as that is still moving forward, and trying to get that processed along. And with that, I don't have anything additional.
Any questions?
No, thanks very much. That was great.
I have one question, because people keep asking me this, because there's a big sign in front of Huntley Square. They're not selling that project that you know of, are they? People say, is that project for sale? I can see this big sign in front of the property, and it looks kind of like it's for sale. So I'm asking.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'll have to drive by and see what the sign
It
is.
didn't really look like, I couldn't quite tell either, but anyway, it doesn't clearly say for sale, but it kind of looks like it could be. I don't know. It was kind of weird, but people just ask me. I have no idea, and I just was wondering if you heard anything. So
Maybe,
but it sounds like they're still going through the process. I'm assuming not, but
maybe it's a notice for upcoming road work closure, because they have to, with the frontage of that site, they are kind of excavating back and then providing on-street public facilities, a sidewalk and stuff like that. So maybe it's a notice that, there's going to be traffic.
It looked like, it had a picture of the project, and anyway, I don't know. Just asking. Sounds like that. Yeah, maybe.
It's similar to the one for Habitat on Main Street. That sign's been there for a little while.
Yeah, could be. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I will adjourn this meeting until our meeting on November 12th. Thank you.
Recording stopped.